Western civilization, the downfall of it, and the rise. From our time of social justice warriors and BLM protesters, fruitcake, frosted harebrained denialism about Western European cultural appropriation, society, civilization, heritage, ethics, beliefs, politics, artifacts, technologies, immigration, colonialization, colonialism, influence, history, revision, the sunset world of the Occidental, the sunrise of the Orient as a pendant. Steampunk gypsies, Snatch, Skid Row, and Pikeys. Those all have something to do with it. Think about them for a few seconds if you want to. You can also read below along with me. The term originally had a literal geographic meaning. It contrasted Europe as being the West, to everybody else, with the East, as it was referred to, which was civilizations in the Middle East, North Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, and the remote Far East, which early modern Europeans saw as just the East. In the contemporary cultural meaning, the phrase Western world, or Western attitude, or Western medicine, all of them, include anything involving Europe, as well as countries of European colonial origin, with substantial European ancestral populations in the Americas and Oceania. But most importantly, it has to do with a certain date and time when everyone found out that the world was literally about double the size they thought it was. They understood the Earth was from 300 BC forward a certain size because that was actually figured out. Some people still refuse to do that experiment. But they just assumed it was ocean. Many of the maps still showed the far west just being the European nodule over here, and then Africa being the southern nodule, and then India being the southeastern nodule, and then, I'm using the word nodule a lot, and then over here was the east, and it was just kind of vague because map making was crude, or worthless, depending on how you look at it. But anyway, we're going to go from 700 BC to today, and this is going to be episode 0, hopefully only, of Western civilization, because I'm going to try to get some things done here on the video as quick as I can. Before 700 BC, Greek philosophy, ancient Rome, the Roman Empire, not the Holy Roman Empire, Christianity at 180, Attila and the Huns touring France and Germany on their blockbuster tour and invasion, 370 to 580. Barbarian invasion or migration period, depending on how you look at it, 480 to 880. 400 years of barbarianism. Now, you may have noticed, if you were paying any attention, that they're not in the right order. A lot of this was done alphabetically, but the point is, it doesn't matter when they happened. Each of these things were literally a separate universe in and of themselves. We're not in that period of time. Someone does a viral video literally in the middle of a war zone of someone tap dancing, we're going to see it. Then they heard about it years later, if they cared. And everybody invaded everybody. Only very tiny populations would be pacifist, mostly because they'd had a history of not needing to do anything. They were capable of being left alone, and if somebody ran roughshod over their lands, they bowed like a tree in the wind and let them go away after a while, because they wouldn't stay in most cases. Most invaders leave. As long as you survive that, you can live another day. Anyway, the early Middle Ages, from 500 to 1000 AD, has these things listed, and they're in no real order here, but we'll just go barrel through them. 610 AD is when Islam started, and the Islamic Empire happened from 711 to 1492 AD, according to this listing. That doesn't necessarily mean it's correct, but let's keep going with it. Norse American colonization. Yeah, the Vikings landing and discovering the far west, as I'm going to call it, 900 AD. High Middle Ages. Wonder if they were doing some ganja. 1000 to 1300 AD. Holy Roman Empire finally starts at 962 AD to 18 1206 AD. Medieval European feudalism occurs from 1000 to 1600, excuse me. And then, during this, scholasticism kicks in. Saint Anselm's critical thought from 1100 to 500 that became the scientific method because it was workable. See, instead of rattling beads or rattling swords or making a guess and taking credit whether you got it right later, critical thought became important because it actually produced results. We'll get to a certain immovable type in a minute, but you get the point. It was useful, so people tolerated it, even though it violated the authority, your authoritar. That became the scientific method. Anyway, the Magna Carta, not so coincidentally, in 1215 AD, and then the Mongol invasion that happened before it, 15 years earlier. Again, they're not really related to each other, but you might want to look at the times and the signs and the population increase and people expanding. Solving problems didn't matter if you couldn't think your way through. Just bludgeoning people to death doesn't work if you're outnumbered 50 to 1, but it'll work if you use a crossbow. One of my friends said this once. I don't know who built the original bow and arrow sling or atlatl, but it probably wasn't the strongest one in the bunch. It's probably overcompensating for weakness. Somebody brilliant figured out how to make a crossbow because they wanted to survive. It's also what happened to the bow and arrow in the first place. I'll do a vid on that some other time. Late Middle Ages, 1300 to 1500. Western Catholic Church Schism, 1378 to 1417 AD. The middle class starts forming. Black Death happens. There's a Renaissance from 1300 to 1600 AD, and in particular the Italian restaurant, Renaissance, I keep saying that, from 1200 AD to 1500 AD, squeezed in the middle there. Then something terrible happened to make it to where people couldn't revise history or revise belief or revise their assertions by just changing their story. Among other things, Johannes Gutenberg, mass printing happens, scribes revolt, and humanism starts, and Leonardo da Vinci happens, and the scribes get angry because you can mass produce something, it will be identical, everybody will have exactly the same copy, and you can't claim one copy is better than the other, you can't lie about them, and unfortunately you're stuck with your story even if you didn't get it right. The Age of Discovery, with Christopher Columbus, Vasco da Gama, the Ottoman Empire, Siege of Vienna in 1529. And then Nicholas Copernicus happened. This is after 1492, you notice. And he moved the Earth from the center of the universe and put it in orbit around the sun. Or at least it wasn't the center of the universe anymore. Now, what benefit is that practically? It's called navigation. It's called being able to find out when the time is happening. It's called being able to correct the calendar because you can really detect when the Earth comes to the same point relative to the Sun lining up with some stars by literally finding out when that happens and finding out that you need to, oops, we got to fix some things. You might also want to look up when the New Testament was built and why, and by who and for how many cookies. Protestant Reformation, 1500 to 1650 AD. Why? Because the Catholic Jihad, Counter-Reformation, 30-year war over religious preeminence and rule. Western colonial exploration, imperialism, 1500 to 1800 then happened. Mercantilism, government control over foreign trade and military security of the state. Age of Enlightenment is as a dawn of modern science. Superstitions are rejected and science and logic embraced, and immediately imposed by the rule, the right, the divine right of king, a theory of political, religious legitimacy and doctrine. that allows the mixing of church and state even tighter as a response. Sounds familiar? Might want to check the rhetoric of your local politician. The Revolution period, which never really ended, but it just started up again. 1770 to 1815. United States Declaration of Independence, 1776, American Revolution, then the French Revolution, then women's rights advocates and feminist philosophies, 1700 AD, then Napoleonic Wars and the rise of the English-speaking world rather than the French-speaking world, 1815 to 1870. The Industrial Revolution from 1750, which arguably pushed forward our thing in 1776, to 1850 AD. Luddites protest being replaced in 1800 AD by machines. UK British imperialism, 1815 to 1870 AD. Constitutional monarchy declared. As opposed to it being literally God-given monarchy, it's a constitutional monarchy because people are starting to realize that being told a story that contradicts the books you've been printing. Slavery is abolished because there's the whole rule of all free men. Canada forms. New Zealand and Australia, a colony from 1788 to 1850, become countries. They happen. United States, 1815 to 1870, expansion. Louisiana Purchase, 1803. Oregon happens. The Confederate secession from 1861 to 1865. What the heck is that? It's the American Revolution. War between the states. Giving it another name doesn't change anything. You'll see a theme here in a minute. Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. Alaska is purchased from Russia, 1867. Spanish Empire falls from 1833, falling apart 1898. Now in the getting close here. Oh, but let's wiggle back a little further. Continental Europe, 1815 to 1870. The Ottoman Empire ends in 1908. Yes, the fall of a Eastern Empire. Austro-Hungarian Empire forms in 1867 and ends in World War I. North German Confederation and German Empire for the Deutsche Reich. William, one emperor, applies to them things. 1871, quinkadangly, to 1918, World War I, knocked it down on its butt. Western culture, arts and sciences from 1815 to 1914, pre-overlapping during all of this. And a new imperialism over Africa. Opium wars in the east, the Chinese Boxer Rebellion, expansion ending only by hitting Antarctica in 1914 from the 1870s that it started in. This was Western arts, culture, sciences, and imperialism, building an empire of the West. This included Canada, by the way. Interwar years and Great Depression, Dust Bowl era, after the First World War, reparations, totalitarianism, and women's rights kicking in as a reaction to it. 1918 to 1939. Fall of Western empires in India, the Belgian Congo, and others through revolutions from 1940 through 1980. Western sexual revolution during the same period of time, or gender revolution, really. Anti-communist revolutions in the West from the East, 1989. Now, what does this all mean? After the New World was discovered, everyone found something to universally hate. Finding out that the world is bigger than it was before, and having people decide all during all of this that they wanted freedom from rule. The old ways are enslavement by a caste system, but we have a middle class, upper and lower class, not a caste system. This is the beginning of what caused self-hatred of the West. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.